Pride. Let's talk about pride because it's Pride Month, right? It's celebration of the LGBTQ plus. But as a lot of us know, that pride itself is not a word that came along as part of the LGBTQ plus movement, but it is a word that has long-standing, had various different types of meanings, and depending on what kind of person you are, you might see being prideful or having pride as a positive or a negative. Now, there's lots of different types of pride, which we're going to be talking about in this video, but the purpose of this video is to really answer the question, is pride a good or bad thing? And is pride what is actually destroying this world we live in today? Is it the number one thing destroying the world we live in today? Now that sounds like such a wild question. Well, if you think that's a wild question, you better stay tuned. If you need to pause the video, if you need to go and get yourself a drink, if you need to go and get yourself a snack, if you need to go and get yourself a notebook, because listen, I wrote so many notes about this, by the way. This is about to be so freaking interesting because we're going to be hitting this from all angles. We're about to dissect. We're about to dismantle. We're about to really get into this, guys, because I'm one of those people where when I think about a concept, I want to, in order to build an opinion, I like to really do a deep dive from many different angles before I draw my conclusions. That's why I think I have pretty fair conclusions and pretty strong conclusions usually, because I look at things from all angles. I'm going to be looking at it from the LGBTQ plus perspective. I'm going to be looking at it from the biblical perspective. I'm going to be looking at it from a scientific, psychological perspective, historical perspective. All of these types of stuff, we're going to be talking about it in this video. So if you guys are ready for this, stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, because you know that you're going to want to join the winning team, because if life's a game, then let's play to win. Join the winning team, and don't forget to like, of course, if you did like the video, because I mean, I would appreciate it, right? Let's get into it, and let me give you guys a backstory, because it's going to help to lay the foundation as to why we're here in the first place. By the way, if you can hear wind in the background, it's because my window is open. That's all. Right, so here's the story in Ballamore today, right? Yesterday, I asked the Lord a question I've asked him many times. And that question was, God, what's the difference between pride and confidence? Because I don't want to be a prideful person. Now, I have to say this, guys. Listen and hear me out, okay? This isn't going to help if you're disagreeing and you're not hearing me out. Hear me out, because we're going to build up. We've got lots to go through in this video, right? So anyways, so I was like, God, what's the difference between pride and confidence? Because I've grown up around, one of the things I struggle with is I struggle to want to show or be confident about things that I've done, or even just be confident about things that I have in a even healthy way, because I've grown up around, I've seen so many, I've experienced so many like heavily prideful people, and I personally see that type of pride, which there's different types of pride that have been theorized, which we'll talk about, by the way, in just a moment. That type of pride that I've seen is ugly to me. Like, people who are just prideful, see themselves above everybody else, like all of that, it's ugly for me. So I'm like, God, I don't want to be anywhere near that. But then I find myself sometimes being too humble. Raise your hand if you know that feeling about being too humble, right? So I was like, Lord, where is the balance? Because I want to be able to feel comfortable, to be proud, if that's the right word even, we're going to talk about it, about what I've done, while at the same time not being so prideful that I'm like one of those people that's just like annoying to be around. Like, I can tell you guys a perfect example of the type of people that I'm talking about. Like, there was this person I knew, a dance choreographer, and it was actually quite interesting, my interactions with this person, because this person did not take me seriously as a choreographer until they saw my choreography. And then all of a sudden they were like, oh my gosh, we should get in the studio together. And I was like, you literally didn't want to work with me. You literally tried to steal my team from me. And now just because you saw my choreography, now you want to get in the studio. And you had nothing to want to do with me. But anyway, this individual was the type of person where everywhere in any conversation they have, they'll have to rattle off every single person that they've worked with, like in terms of the industry, right? And it was just to the point where it was like, it was to the point where some of us would laugh about it, because we would know that if this person was around, like, just wait for them to be like, yeah, and so I toured with so and so and so and so. And this is like completely unsolicited, mind you. And these are the types of people where when I see like how they act and then I see how people feel, that's what makes me think I'm just going to be the most humblest of all humbles that I can possibly be, right? But obviously the other thing I was saying to the Lord is, in this life, we should be able to be proud of what we've achieved, as in, like, for example, if you've worked super hard to become an Olympic athlete, There, you have worked hard for that. There, you should be able to feel happy and confident and comfortable in the world to say, hey, look what I did, right? But then here's the thing about pride that we're going to get into, right? Which is that who deserves the overall credit? And that's kind of where this all starts to get interesting as far as pride, when we're talking about who gets the overall credit. But we're gonna come to that in a moment, right? We're gonna come to that. We're gonna first of all start with the two types of pride that were theorized by, who were they theorized by? Just give me a second while I find my notes on this. All right, so that in a 2007, I think it's a study or a book by Tracy and Robbins, where they talked about the psychological structure of pride. They proposed that pride, there's a dichotomy with pride, right? Basically, so you have authentic pride, right? Or you have hubristic pride, which is like linked to the word hubris, the Greek word hubris, which is like excessive pride or self-confidence. So when we're talking about authentic pride, it's linked to, or this is what they've theorized, it's linked to achievement, self-confidence, productivity, and self-worth. Listen, even for this Pride Month and everything, we're going to get there. It's all going to click together. Just stay on this journey with me, okay? We're going to get there, right? So linked to, yeah, achievement, self-confidence, productivity, and self-worth, right? So kind of similar to what I said to you guys about being an Olympian type of thing. You've worked really hard. You're confident because you can say you're the best swimmer in the world, or you won gold, whatever. Like, great. You know what I'm saying? Now we have the hubristic, which, let's start with the first word here that they've used, is excessive pride or self-confidence. So we're talking about in excess, right? As in outside of what is justifiable, which we're going to come back more to what that means. It then talks about how that links, they then spoke about how that links to dominance and social validation. By the way, I don't know if I said this already, but I'm going to link the video that really formed the basis of this whole theory, because I was writing notes throughout this video and then I kind of extended off the video. You guys know how that's kind of how I work with stuff. Like, I see stuff, I listen to it, I make notes, and then I kind of like refer to it, but then like extend off of it into my own ether, you know? Anyway, so then it goes on to say, but I'm going to link the video in the top part of the description. Watch the video. It's such a good video, incredible video. Can't remember the name of the guy, otherwise I would say it right now. But anyway, it motivates the pursuit of extrinsic goals. So hubristic pride is motivated by extrinsic goals, things that are on the outside, things that people can see, right? And it leads to the acknowledgement of others. As in, that's what kind of becomes the fuel source as well, which we'll come to, is it's about being acknowledged by others. That's why it's extrinsic as opposed to intrinsic, which might be that I, for myself, might just decide that I want to become a gold medalist because I think I'm capable of doing so, and I want to be able to show my children that they can achieve anything they want to achieve. That's more of an intrinsic goal. As far as an extrinsic goal is more like, I want to win the Olympics because I want to be able to feel better than everybody else, and I want people to look up to me as some kind of superstar who's above them, and I want to feel superior, which this superiority, inferiority is going to become very important as we continue down our journey of pride, right? So now let's talk more about this, right? It's about this authentic versus hubristic pride. So now we're going to talk about a different guy who wrote, a man called Arthur Schopenhauer, and his description of pride versus vanity, which you can kind of compare with the difference between authentic versus hubristic pride, right? And he says, pride works from within. It is the direct appreciation of oneself, right? Vanity is the desire to arrive at this appreciation indirectly from without. And I like how he put it, indirectly from without, because it reminded me of the video that I did. If you guys remember, it's a really good video called Image versus Character, about how we live in a world that is very much more interested in image than character. And that's because image is easy to create, right? It's easy to create the image of whatever it is that you want to create. Just like how as a woman, it's easy for me to, I'll use a perfect example. It's easy for me to, as a woman, create the image through makeup, through plastic surgery, through all these things of what I want to look like. But it takes somebody of a certain type of character, right, to be able to have the discipline to go to the gym regularly and have the discipline to eat a balanced and healthy and nutritious diet, to be disciplined enough to look after your hair and look after your skin, you're in your natural state and this, that, and the other. Now, this isn't like the deeper things of image and character, because obviously appearance as a whole is pretty superficial, but you guys get the gist of the difference between the easy just changing of image, and how in one way you can give an image of something that you haven't actually worked for, as in without appreciation, as in vanity is the desire to arrive at this appreciation indirectly from without, right? And so that's what made me start to think about this image versus character, because I was saying to you guys that we live in a world, and I believe this is straight from the pits of hell, that we live in a world where it is important, where we are being pushed to have a certain image and to focus on image, because that means that all the things that are going on behind us, the character, the things going on us on the inside, or rather not just on the inside of us, but on the inside of our homes, on the inside of our communities, we hide and can hide behind this image that everything looks great. Now, this is why I find these topics so interesting, because that is something that I am violently allergic to, is trying to have this image that isn't real. And that's why I always tell you guys stuff about me, and I always give my opinions real and raw, because although I know that I could not say certain things and you guys would be like, I would have more subscribers and I would have more support and blah blah blah, and I wouldn't overthink my videos so much, it's not authentic. I'm just hiding things, and I'm more caring about what my image, right, which is a prideful thing. Why am I being subdued by my image? Because I care about what people think, because I want that appreciation. It's going back to the difference between the hubristic type of pride, right, which motivates pursuit of extrinsic goal, leads to acknowledgement of others, versus authentic, which is linked to achievement, self-confidence, productivity, and self-worth, which again goes back to what I've said to you guys, is one of the reasons why I feel comfortable to be myself and just be true to myself is because I have done things to myself that I believe gives me the right, not even the right, that I feel comfortable in being myself, because I know what I've done to be here. I have a sense of self-worth. I have a sense of achievement in my life, which I'm very proud of, ironically, right? And productivity. And so, you know, I don't really have to care what other people say, because what I've done is already speaks for itself. You feel me? So, he goes on to say, this is John Amadeo. This is really good. And he wrote a PhD. He's got a PhD, and he wrote Why Pride is Nothing to be Proud of. This is interesting. He says, a more genuine and stable self-worth is based upon validating, affirming, and valuing ourselves as we are. Self-worth is a function of living with dignity, which exists apart from any accomplishment, right? I.e., who you are when everything else isn't there. That is where we can derive a true sense of self-worth, right? But it goes on to say, achievements are ephemeral and can become a trap. If too much of our attention goes towards accomplishing bigger and better things in order to feel good, then we become adhered to an external source of gratification. And that's exactly what we see in the world today, guys. If you think about it, this is why I said, is pride destroying our world? I made a video talking about how us ladies are competing in the attention Olympics, and I will just say for now that we won't be, I did take that video down for reasons I'm not going to get into right now, but you know, this is what I'm saying as far as like, sorry, what was I even saying? Yes, so you look to achievements as a sort of gratification. When you put your goal, when you put your view of self into others, into the hands of others, and into, which is the easy way to do it, because it's easy to do certain things in order to gain validation, right? It's easy to pick a certain type of job role to get a certain type of, if you get to that type of job role, then you'll be seen in a certain way, but that says nothing about who you are as a person. And if you lose that job role, then you've lost your identity. This is why I think we're living in an identity crisis, because a lot of people are putting up their self-worth based on, we're going to talk about this as far as the LGBTQ+, because this is where we're going with this, by the way, is that they're putting their gratification, their achievement, on something that is outside of them, right? That is extrinsic, right? And something that can be taken away, or something that can not. Because if you think about it, guys, right? Think about even, let's say, the LGBTQ+. I was having this conversation with a few other heterosexual people yesterday, and I was just saying to them, I was saying, and this is the truth, and I mean this with I mean this in the most kind, respectful way, guys. And if you're a member of the LGBTQ+, genuinely, I want you to hear me out when I say this, right? I was thinking, I have no idea what my life would look like if being heterosexual was my identity, or was part of my identity. And as a woman, the only way I can see that, and this is what I said to these people I was talking to, the only way I can see that being such a fundamental part of my identity is if I was a hoe. You know what I'm saying? But other than that, I don't understand, because to me, that's such a small part of who I am as a person. Like that's like such a small part. Like it's like not even a part almost. It just happens to be a fact that goes along with it. There are so many other things about me that make up who I am, the makeup of my identity as a person. Like things about me, things like that I'm a problem solver and I'm good at solving problems. Things like that I really care about children a lot, and I want to have a lot of children because I really love children, and that's just something, you know what I mean? All these things are, first of all, way more interesting. Second of all, have a lot more to do with a sense of true identity as what somebody can see as an imprint of who I am, specifically, individually, uniquely, me as a person, versus I'm a part of this group. And actually, let's go straight to this. Let's go straight to this, because one of these people, I'm so glad that this is just flowing. This is the Lord, guys, because I have so many notes. I was like, God, I don't even know what order to go through all of this in, but let's go somewhere with this, right? There's a really good thing I want to talk about. Where is it? It's talking about like national pride, and it's really very interesting what I found that were and again, all these thought points were triggered from this video that I'm going to link, guys, so please do look into it. Yes, okay, here we go. This is going to sound really deep, right? Now, this is again by this German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, and it's called Unfounded, and it's talking about unfounded pride, right? So let's just listen to this, right? He says, the cheapest sort of pride is national pride, right? For if a man is proud of his own nation, it argues that he has no qualities of his own which he can be proud. I.e., so if you want to talk about what he means national pride, it's like taking pride in an overall group that you're a part of. So it's like being proud of being, let's say, American, being proud of being black, being proud of being a supporter of PSG. That type of thing. It's like a national kind of group pride type of situation is what, well, he's talking about national specifically. I'm extending it in my understanding and my belief to this kind of group type of pride, right? So that's what he's talking about. So he says, for if a man is proud of his own nation, it argues that he has no qualities of his own of which he can be proud. Otherwise, he would not have recourse to those which he shares so many millions of his fellow men. So interesting, I understanding here, and if you guys understood differently, feel free to share your interpretation in the comments. What I'm understanding here is he's saying that we can easily want to have pride. People who are very quick to have pride in stuff like that, a lot of the times it's because they don't have anything personally to have pride for themselves on, as in individual personal achievements or whatever, which we're going to go to. What it's not about achievements, by the way. The achievement thing is about to, we're going to unpack the underpinnings of all of this in a minute, so just stick with me here, right? So if you don't necessarily, which is where we're going basically, which is if you don't necessarily feel you have something individually to be proud of, then the cheapest way to find pride, is what he's saying, is by having a kind of national group pride. He says, the man who is endowed with important personal qualities will be only too ready to see clearly in what respects his own nations will fall short, since their failing will be constantly before his eyes. But every miserable fool who has nothing at all of which he can be proud adopts as last resort pride in the nation to which he belongs. He is ready and glad to defend all its faults and follies tooth and nail, this reimbursing himself for his own inferiority. So we've circled back, yes, I said circled back, to this inferiority and superiority situation, because essentially what's happening here is he's saying that the reason that people who have their own intrinsic pride, their own authentic pride, you could call it, from things that they feel they can hold for themselves, things that they've achieved, so their own sense of self-worth, right? So it's realistically, let's say when we're talking about authentic pride, I believe we're talking about the marriage between like achievement and self-worth, right? So because I believe true self-worth will lead to achievement. That's what I believe, you know what I'm saying? But then I can also believe you can have achievement without self-worth. So you need to have the self-worth first, otherwise the achievement is just going to lead you into problematic pride, hubristic pride. But anyway, so he's saying that the reason why people could be a part of a nation, so let's say, for example, I also use the black community because I'm black, not because this isn't true for other communities, because I believe this is true of all people who are like this. When you're part of a group and that part of the nation that you're a part of, or the race or whatever that you're part of, and that is the thing you're proud of just because, and that's the only thing you have to be proud of, you're going to defend, like he said, its fault and follies tooth and nail. This reimbursing himself for his own inferiority. This is the only thing you have to be proud of. So this thing that you're proud of cannot be criticized, and there can be nothing wrong with it, because it means that there must be something wrong with you, because this is the only thing you have to have pride in. I know that this is true because I know that for me, one of the reasons why I don't get offended, and a lot of people don't get offended about certain things that are said about certain types of groups. So like for me, with black people, when say black people this, black people that, my identity is, again, not in the fact that I'm a black person. It's a part of my identity is that I'm a black person, but it is not my whole identity. So when people criticize black people, I'm like, well, you know what? You might say black people are lazy. It doesn't affect me, and it doesn't trigger me, because I don't feel inferior, right? Because I know I'm superior, because I know even as a black woman at 22 years old, I was working as an entrepreneur in London, self-employed. So it's like, who are you going to tell? How are you going to tell me that whatever somebody has to say in criticism, I'm like, listen, I already beat the criticism, so it doesn't affect me, right? But then other people who might have a sense of inferiority, who might actually believe, this is where I think a lot of this pridefulness comes from, is that if you actually deep down believe or agree to some extent, or that the things that you're being critiqued on are true, let's talk about it, right? Then you are going to be even more wanting to defend your nation that you're a part of blindly, because in you defending it, you're also justifying, right, reimbursing himself for his own inferiority. So let's talk about this whole inferiority and superiority thing, right? So let's go all the way back to what a prideful person actually is. His name is Eiselganger, the YouTuber. I'm going to link the video. His name's Eiselganger. I knew I must have written it in here. I was like, how have I not written this man's name in here? Let's talk about this inferiority, superiority thing, right? Let's talk about it. Now, guys, I hope you're still listening, because this is actually so good. But anyway, so we're going to start with what a proud person is, right? Somebody who sees himself exceptionally high, full of himself, feels elevated above others, thinks he knows better and more capable than others, even when they have more expertise than him. Now, this is the part that really hit me in the end, part that even more expertise than him, because as far as the negative version of pride, let's say the hubristic version of pride, let's say the popularly understood version of pride outside of the current movement of the LGBTQ+, there is always this kind of undercurrent, I'm realizing, with pride of delusion, which we're going to come to more as we get through the video. I've written the question down here. Why would somebody delude themselves that they are the expert when they are not? Now, this has happened to me. This is why I was saying this is so interesting, me going through all of this, where I will be in a conversation with somebody. I can think of somebody right now. This is why I was like, so many questions I've asked the Lord were being answered as I was doing this research. So I was like, I've been in questions with people, or I've seen people in situations where we've all seen it. Some people having a discussion. There's somebody who's clearly more of an expert, and then there's somebody else, right? So for example, you could have I'll give a very simple example. You could have a discussion between two women. You've got a woman who has never had children, right? Never even looked after children, right? In her entire life, has been completely career focused for the past 40 years, never looked after kids, doesn't even like kids, right? Then you've got on the other side, you've got a mum of like 10 children, all of them who've come out of her womb. Not only that, she actually has worked around children her whole life since she was young. Children. And what you'll find is they'll be having a discussion, and the person who has never had children, never worked around children, doesn't know anything about children, will be trying to tell the person who is highly expert in children, right? I think we can all agree in this scenario that the person who's had 10 kids and has worked with kids is the expert in this dynamic. They will be trying to tell the other lady about what she should and shouldn't do, or what parenting is or isn't, and it's like, sis, what are you talking about, right? And a lot of that comes down to pride. That's what a lot of prideful people will do. That's what I realized, because I realized as well that like a lot of the most intelligent people as well are like the most humble, and it's because they're humble enough to know they need to learn, and that's what actually leads to their intelligence. And that's why pridefulness actually leads to foolishness, which we talked about in the January wisdom series, guys. We did 31 days, one day each in Proverbs. Go and check it out because it was a really good series. And listen, based on this video, I think it's aging very well. So anyway, so why would somebody delude themselves that they are the expert when they are not? We're going to answer that in a second. Why is being at the top more important than anything else to some people? Because this is also the other thing for me, is I'm just like, sometimes, like, I remember I got into this disagreement with somebody I determined to be very prideful, right, that I know personally. And we were having a discussion about something really, really not important. Ready? I'm going to tell you what happened, right? So we were having this discussion, and I like to shop in the reduced section in the supermarket because you can get good things in there on a discount, and depending on what it is, throw it in the freezer. That is one of my life hacks. I don't know why people look down on doing stuff like that. I think that's freaking genius, right? So that's what I do. I'll go and always look in the reduced section, see if there's anything that either I'm going to eat today or I can store in the freezer, you know, safely. And I love doing that. I did that yesterday, and I'm loving and living my life right now, right? So I'm like doing that. So I know somebody else who's also a fan of doing that. Now me, being the person I am, I'm thinking, hey, let's compare notes. This is so cool. We like to save money, blah, blah, blah. So I'm talking to this person that I know, who I know to be a prideful person, right? But obviously, because I don't function in that way of thinking, I've not really realized that this is where this conversation is going. So I say to this person, they're like, oh, hey, they had just got some deals at the same place I just got some deals for some stuff, and I was like, oh, this is cool, and then they were like, yeah, you know, I think I'm the best at they said, you know, I think I'm the best at getting the best deal in the reduced section, whatever. And then I was like, oh, well, actually, I think I'm the best. But I was saying it as a joke. You know, like when you're with around healthy, humble people, and you can actually joke about stuff like this, and it's actually just funny. Yeah. So this doesn't what happened with prideful people, because this person clapped back and were like, no, I'm the best at doing this, and I'm the best. And I was like, you are the best. Like, do you think I care? Do you think I really care about being the best? Like, the fact that you care this deeply and are getting angry is bewildering me. Why does it matter? Like, who cares? Like, be the best. Because this is my point. I was making a joke. I thought we were in a safe environment where I could make a joke, because who cares, right? That's what I'm thinking. Who cares about being the top? Who's so obsessed with being at the top? Prideful people. Prideful people. And we're going to get into just why that is in just a moment, right? So, going back to what this article by John Amadeo in Psychology Today, titled "Why Pride is Nothing to Be Proud of," he goes to talk to the root of pride, which is, he says, pride is often driven by poor self-worth and shame. We feel so badly about ourselves that we compensate by feeling superior. Guys, do you understand where we're going with this? This video, listen. So I then have written here, we'll come back to what I've written here, but we'll continue with what he says, and then we'll come back to what I've written. He says, we look for others' flaws as a way to conceal our own. We relish criticizing others as a defense against recognizing our own shortcomings, right? So he then goes, so now the man who made this video, Eiselganger, says, excessively prideful people feel inherently inferior, otherwise the need to be better than others wouldn't be so high on the agenda. So we're going to talk about what that goes into. If those of you who've been on this channel for long enough, you're going to know exactly what category of people we're going to. But before we do that, I want to just talk here about what I look at this as, and it goes back to lack of identity. It's a lack of identity, because when you are a prideful person, which we're seeing here that the root of pride in its negative form, now we're talking more on the hubristic pride, the need to have the acknowledgement of others, the need to have something what was I saying here? Yeah, to feel like the expert, to feel above, comes from the fact that deep down you feel inferior. Deep down you feel like you don't have something to stand on other than whatever that thing is you're fighting for. That, ladies and gentlemen, reeks of cancel culture right now, which we're going to come to. It absolutely reeks of all of these wars, these social action justice wars. And lastly, guys, what it reeks of is a lack of identity, which is where we're going, because you're finding your identity in something outside of yourself, right? Something that isn't actually a truly part of identity, and therefore you have to defend it to the end. You have to critique everybody else as well who doesn't agree with it, because if they don't agree with it, if your thing you've picked your identity to be about is being criticized or dismantled, you no longer have an identity, and you have to deal with your feelings of inferiority and shame. Sounds deep, right? And I just want to quickly give some examples, guys, of some versions of pride that are day-to-day types of pride, right? We have watching reality TV shows to laugh at the stupidity of others versus us, which I find interesting because I do love reality TV, but I just love it because I think it's just fun. Like, sometimes it's nice to watch something that's not so serious, especially being somebody like me who's always thinking about these deeper things. I love to just like watch like things that I can just like go off into the oblivion of. But there's certain reality TV I can't watch because I start to get really upset that like about just a lot of things about how it's functioning. But I didn't realize that people really are just enjoying laughing at the stupidity of others. That's prideful. Gossiping about people just to feel better about ourselves, that's prideful, right? Another thing that I can't participate in. Cancelling people who do or say what we disagree with under the guise of making the world a better place. Did she go there? She went there. It's prideful. It's prideful because I always, and this is where the hypocrisy comes in the cancel culture. This is where the hypocrisy comes in the cancel culture, because I always point out the hypocrisies in cancel culture, if you guys will realize. So I want to write this down because I might need to put this in the title. Yeah, this is where the hypocrisy comes in the cancel culture. And I talked to you guys about selective activism, right? I made multiple videos about selective activism and how I find it interesting that people will say that they've gone vegan, they've doing this, they're supporting the LGBTQ+, they're supporting BLM, they're doing this to make the world a better place. But I always find it fascinating the ways that they are hypocrites to their own thing, and also find it fascinating how they want to care about the planet and protecting one thing, but they don't care about another thing, right? So people will be so dedicated to protecting the animals, but we don't care about protecting the children, right? All these hypocrisies. Why is that? Because this is to do with pride. I want to have something that I can have that makes me feel better than you and above you, so I can critique you and make you the problem, right? And feel better about myself. So that's where that comes from. And we're going to delve even further into that in just a moment. So this whole excessive prideful people, this whole needing to feel superior, right? Where do we think we're going with this, guys? Narcissism. Because narcissism is a deep form of pride. Because if you think about it, as I've said to you guys before, and again, just to clarify, because some people are going to say, are you qualified to speak on narcissism? I'm not qualified to speak on narcissistic personality disorder. However, I am able to speak about narcissism, as are all of you guys, because it is something that even the experts say can be used as a descriptive term to describe a collection of behaviors or behavioral patterns, okay? So just to say that for those of you who might be concerned as to, can I even talk about narcissism? We've actually made lots of videos on this channel about narcissism. So, a narcissistic person needs superiority in the world or would collapse from the weight of self-perceived inadequacy, right? So, again, I say this, that I've said this about narcissistic people, where the narcissistic person needs so deeply to have this, like, fake reality, this image that people believe in, right? This is why they need sources for that image. They need people that they can take from to create this image of who they are, to shield from who they truly are. That's why when you're somebody who deals with a narcissistic person, it is a very exhausting relationship, because they have to take from you, because essentially they're using your energy, they're using your resources, they're using everything you're giving them to build this fake reality, because they cannot stand on their own. If you're a person who does not need to create this fake reality, there is no need to be putting energy into building this fake reality of who you are and needing the acknowledgement of others, because who cares? And this is what's actually funny to me, which is why I find that the Lord always has the last laugh, because I've dealt with actually narcissistic people, right? And I've dealt with people who are like highly prideful, and what I've realized is, in them working so hard to use me as a way to make them look better and create their fake reality, it eventually led to me just having to not even care what people think, because a lot of people think the worst because they believe these people who are lying and betraying and lying on my name, right? And then I just became super comfortable in just being myself. So then my life is actually, I'm actually way happier. Like, I sleep better than them. I'm actually thriving more than them, because all that energy they're spending on trying to just be acknowledged in a certain type of way and lying on my name and betraying me and all this, right? All that energy they're using doing that, I'm using that energy building in my life. I'm using that energy spending time with the Lord. I'm using that energy, you know, being productive. You know what I'm saying? And so it's quite interesting to see who has the last laugh at the end of the day, just to say that, right? So let's talk about Narcissus, right? Who is a Greek myth. It's a Greek myth, and it's about a guy who fell in love with his own reflection so much he couldn't look away. And he ended up dying because he forgot to eat and drink because he was so busy looking at himself. It goes on to say that people loved Narcissus because he could only love himself, which ultimately separated him from everybody, which we're going to talk about how prideful people leads to divisiveness, and again go back to how this links to cancel culture, social action, social justice, and why I'm asking the question, is pride what is actually truly destroying this world that we live in, right? So in this case, interestingly enough, was mentioned in this video that many are focused on their social media image than the experience of life and having meaningful connections. This is so true. And you know what, guys? Shout out to the Lord, because I was talking about this in one of my recent videos where I was saying that literally, actually, my vlog that just went up before this video that I finished editing literally yesterday. Funny enough, after I finished making these notes, but anyway. And I was talking in there about how I was away in Italy for 3 weeks as a professional singer. Yeah, so cool. I was in Rome. I was in Reggio Emilia. We sang in front of like 5,000, 10,000, then 26,000, 30,000 people right on stage. And people were like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. It's so flashy, right? And I was just saying to the Lord that, like, this is my worst nightmare, because I don't care about the flashy things. I want things that are meaningful. I want to have people. I want to have a family. I want to have friends. You know what I mean? I want to have the meaningful things in life, you know? So it's just interesting how this all came about, right? And so with this Narcissus dude, right? Oh yeah, the point of me mentioning that is just to say that it made me realize the reason why I struggle with people understanding how I feel about this is because people really care more about that stuff. Like, people would really rather have, this is the world we live in. We live in the superficial world where people care more about what can I post on Instagram, what can I post on TikTok, can I show off what I'm doing? Like, if I'm doing something, if I can't document it, then what's the freaking point? Because I want to get the clout, I want to get the whatever, and we just don't even care about the meaningful things anymore. So that was just an interesting revelation for me to have had. So anyways, Amadeo goes on to say that such overconfidence and arrogance pushes us away. So we're talking about Narcissus still here. It pushes us away. Instead of relating to us as equals, they display an obnoxious superiority that makes us feel small. This is what happens with prideful people, right? And we're going to go ahead and talk about the religious people right now, okay? Because I have an issue with religion. And I've said to you guys that I have an issue with religion because I feel like religion is a very rooted in pride. Relationship with the Lord is rooted in humility. I believe and have the relationship I have with God, not because I believe that I'm better than others, but I believe that God knows better than me, and that I am just as susceptible and just as sinful and problematic as anybody and everybody else. And we all need God just as much as we all need God, okay? So that's where relationship with God comes from, as how God intended. Religion is, I do this and I do that, so I think that I'm better than you. So let's talk about the purpose of the law, because I have a theory as to why God gave the Old Testament and then the New Testament. I believe that the purpose of the Old Testament, which we'll call the law, right? The law. This is when the expectation to be worthy enough was on humanity. This is what I believe the law was. I believe the law was intended to dispel pride in humanity and help us to understand our need for God and that we as humans are equal. Because a lot of people look at the Old Testament as a bunch of rules and a bunch of commandments and all of that type of stuff, which is not how I see it at all. I look at the Old Testament as a story about a father and his children who repeatedly disobey him, who repeatedly let him down, who repeatedly go off and run off to have other fathers and all sorts and whatever, and he repeatedly comes back to love them, and he repeatedly comes back and is there for them as soon as they're ready to run back, right? It's almost like an extended version of the story of the prodigal son, right? And what I believe the purpose of that was for God to show us in 4K, right? In 4K in the Bible, that we will never get everything right on our own. We will never. So let's stop trying to think that we can. We need God, which is where believing we're better than God, and we'll come to that in a minute, but we need God. But then it's also to say to us that, listen, you ain't better than nobody, right? Abraham was out here lying. Noah was all an alcoholic. There was all sorts of, who are the other people that did things? He used Rahab, who was a prostitute, who lived in the walls prostituting, who helped the people of the Lord. She was actually a very key person in helping the people of the Lord. Why do you think that God uses these types of people? The point is that it's not about having a relationship with God, and having God was never about being above. That's religion. That's pride. I think I'm better than you because I go to church 10 times a week. I think I'm better than you because I don't drink wine. I think I'm better than you because I blah, 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 right? It was never about that. But then it was also about, and this is the key part that's also a part of the pride part, it's twofold here, the thinking you're better than people, and then there's thinking you're better than or equal to God. And that's where pride really starts to run rampant. And perfectly, as I'm mentioning it, we say, I've written here on the next page, Satan. The father of narcissism. Now, before we do that, I've continued with this. I've continued with this Amadeo quote. It says, they have the knack, oh yes, so this is prideful people, and again, religious folk, they have the knack of making us feel the shame that they refuse to face within themselves. Now, I want to talk about this, guys. So I want to talk about the fact that I was thinking about pridefulness and the knack of making us feel shame. And I specifically started to think about the Pharisees in the Bible, because the Pharisees in the Bible I find very interesting, because the Pharisees were the Jewish Pharisees were the ones who killed Jewish Jesus, right? And so he was killed by his very own people. Interesting, isn't it? And the thing I've always wondered is I've always been trying to wrap my head around for a while why they, who understood the scriptures more than anybody else, because that's what they would have to do to get to that position. They were the ones, in order to become a Pharisee, a Sadducee, a chief priest and whatever, you were supposed to be the best men of society, because if you were not able by 13 years old to have learnt the whole Torah and learn all of this stuff, then that's when you'd go off and do other jobs. But if you were good enough, you would get to go on and be these men. So they were men of higher status, right? Superior. So I started to think, why is it that, and that's why, again, Jesus came in and was just obliterating religion by choosing a fisherman, a physician, and doing all of this different stuff, because they're like, how are you going to choose these unworthy people? That's the attitude of the Pharisees, right? Now, that's because they didn't understand the grace of God, and they were looking at religion, and they were not looking at relationship, and they were looking at the law as something that, as if they could ever match up to it. And this is why I think the Pharisees were so prideful, because deep down, they were the most aware of how inferior they were, because they knew the scriptures better than anybody. So they knew deep down how much they did not match up to the scriptures. And I believe that was what was destroying them, right? And so I think that their pride was being threatened when Jesus comes along. Excuse me. When Jesus comes along, he's born in a manger somewhere. Why do you think God did all of this stuff? It is all to do with pride. It's to do with all of this stuff we're talking about right now. It's to show what God truly values and what it's about. Jesus coming, even who Jesus was, he doesn't need to be acknowledged, come in on a big, I was going to say diamond enchanted armor. You know, he doesn't need to come in diamond enchanted armor, right? And slaying off all the people that are against his people for him to be the child of God. What he came to do is he came to set the captives free. And when he means captives, he's talking a lot of the time about the intrinsic things, the things going on the inside. That's why what were the first things that Jesus was doing? Ironically, his first miracle was turning water into wine, which again, the religious folk try to just have every single way to try and explain for God what he meant, which is really quite funny, actually. But, and again, I think, again, that's rooted in, we want to feel better than you because we don't drink alcohol, because we are better than you, right? Anyways, but then what is he doing? He's doing deliverances, he's doing healings, he's casting out demons, all this stuff. Why is he doing that? Because he cares about the intrinsic things, the things on the inside. Even when he sees the woman at the well, right? and she's got 5 husbands. He says to her, you've got 5 husbands, right? And you've had 4 husbands, and the husband you're with now isn't your husband, right? He's saying that to her to show that he is, you know, God, who he is. But then he goes, the water you're drinking now, I can give you the water the water you're drinking now, you will thirst again. I can give you the water that you will drink and you will never thirst again. Right? And I just think it's so beautiful that God cares about the deeper things that are going on inside of us, because he knows that's what really matters. And he knows that it's so easy to get caught up in this like fake image, because we live in a world where we can have this image and we can live in this image. But in order to live in that image, then we have to become prideful people, because we have to then see ourselves as better, because our sense of self-worth, or our sense of achievement, or our sense of pride is coming in extrinsic things, right? And so this leads to divisiveness. So let's talk about the divisiveness of pride, right? So like I said, you can have the divisiveness of pride in a positive way, as far as the Olympics, right? Where you might be supporting Team USA, you might be supporting Team Japan, you might be supporting Team Venezuela, great. Or like the World Cup and stuff, right? But then we have the negative side of that, which is like racism, religion, you know what I'm saying? That type of thing. It leads to divisiveness and hostility. And so, where am I going with this? Yeah, it leads to divisiveness and hostility. And again, why does that happen? Because again, if you're in the things where it comes down to things like racism, I believe a lot of racism is not that people, and I've said this before, this is why I'm not quick to call people racist. I think a lot of people who are racist, they actually fear the other race that they are being racist towards in some way. As in, they actually feel inferior to that race in some type of way. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. So where are we going with this? Where was I even going with this? So I was saying about the divisiveness. Oh yeah, so then I was going to say quickly that the divisiveness, by the way, of, oh yeah, this is perfect. So the divisiveness of pride is, as we see it in the world today, as we see it in cancel culture, as we see it in social media, people are in argument, we're divided, right? We were all, isn't it interesting how we were all fighting for unity? We're now all celebrating pride, and what are we in? Division. We're like more divided than ever. It's like even uncomfortable. Let's talk about how uncomfortable it is sometimes, guys, for us to just be around each other because of elephants in the room, as far as being different genders, as far as being different races. It's actually weird. It actually can be uncomfortable now, even for people who don't are not diehards of any of these groups, because it's so divisive. And this is why I know it's a lie that comes straight from the pits of hell, because that's exactly how Satan works, right? Is he creates division with something that looks good. It always starts out good, like, we just want to change the planet, we just want to change the world, love is love, like, my body, my choice. It all sounds so good, right? But then it leads to divisiveness, but then it leads to issues, and then we wonder how we got here, and we say, oh, I just wanted to live my life and have my own rights. Exactly. So don't come to God and be like, God, why is there suffering in the world when you asked for your rights? He gave you your rights to live your life the way you want to, and you created the world that you wanted to have. And this is why I'm asking the question, is pride what's destroying this world right now? Right? Don't come back running to the Lord when you went against everything he said that he was this and he was that, when you got to live the way you wanted to, and look how divided we are right now. You see what I'm saying? So that's where like the whole divisiveness thing comes from, and I find that really truly fascinating, the divisiveness of pride. And this is actually a good place for us to go now, because we're going to look at a Bible verse specifically where it says, this is in Romans 12:16, and it says, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Let's unpack this on levels, right? Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud. We prideful people cannot live in harmony with one another. You know why? That's again what I was just talking about. We live in a society where you, like certain communities, okay, fight for certain types of rights. Great. You should have rights. We should all have, I believe God gave us free will. This is why I love America, because I believe it's the one place that we have the closest to the freedom that the Lord intended for us to have on earth, on all of earth right now, right? You have the right to live your life the way you want to, but where we need to draw the line and live in harmony is that while maintaining other people's right to live their life the way they want to. And that's where a lot of the issues, if you think about it, and the divisiveness in society is coming today. This is why I'm saying, is pride really something we should be celebrating, right? Because people are trying to now impose. It went from, because I've always thought, right, can I just say this? One thing I think about the United States that I think is amazing, and I think this is a great way to run a country, is you have different states, and different states can have different laws, right? And that means you can all be part of one overall nation. You can all call yourself American. But if you want to live this type of lifestyle and have these type of laws, you can go to this state. If you want to have these type of lifestyle and these type of laws, you can go to that state, and you can actually move to any state. I think America has got the right idea as far as that. And I think the fact that people were upset about this whole Roe v. Wade situation is really so ridiculous, because again, the people who are getting upset are the people who want to enforce what they want onto everybody else. That's not living in harmony. Living in harmony means that I get to do what I want to do, live my life and live my family and live my purpose the way I need to over here, and you go do that over there. And I'm not telling you to take away nothing from you, because I will tell you guys this and this right now. Any group that I disagree with, I fully believe has the right to exist and live their life the way they want to, because God gave us all free will, right? The only issue comes when we can't allow each other to live together. And this is where the divisiveness of pride comes, because you see yourself superior, because you think your way is better, you think your way of doing things is better. That means now you want to impose that on others. Whereas if we saw ourselves in humility and in equalness as the way the Lord intended, then we'd understand that, okay, I don't agree with you, but you have the right to live in harmony doing what you want to do, and I have the right to live in harmony doing what I want to do. Then it says, do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Now, again, this is the prideful thing, which is really quite funny to me, right? Is how we in society, again, and this is the prideful thing, we would prefer to be seen with somebody of a higher status than of somebody of a lower status, just because they have a higher status, right? And it actually hemorrhages our society, right? Because you'll be in a situation where you'll be absolutely breaking your back, right? Trying to get just the lowest level job in a certain company just to say that you work at that company. Meanwhile, somebody that you know who's got a actually working business that's growing, that's thriving, has a great salary and a decent salary and benefits for you, and you get to be a part of the company from the beginning, which actually gives you opportunities to have some serious stakes in the company in the long run. You're not interested because that's a local person you know and they're not rich and famous, but you'd rather just have the name of JP Morgan Chase, even though you, and then creatively and coincidentally ignore certain information that we know about certain individuals. You know what I'm saying? If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, you need to check out my JP Morgan Chase videos. And it says, do not be conceited, right? I just love the Bible. I just think that God is a genius, quite frankly. I just think that God is a genius. Oh yeah, here I was talking about the Pharisees. So yes, pridefulness leads to divisiveness. Now, let's talk about, now I want to talk about credit as far as pride, right? Credit. Because, oh, should we go here first? Yeah, let's talk about credit. Because a lot of people, we spoke earlier about what's it called? Authentic pride. And was it authentic? We're going to get there in just a second. Because pride in the Bible is seen as a sin, right? I will read you a couple of scriptures. Don't worry, guys. We're going to unpack this because it's like, why is God so obsessed with this, right? Let's answer that question. It says here in Proverbs 16:18, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. It goes then on to say, Proverbs 16:5 says, the Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. And then I've got here, I've written the question, why does God punish the proud? Then I've written, pride introduces feelings that you're better than others and therefore entitlement. We haven't even talked about the pride and then the entitlement portion, which let's talk about cancel culture. Let's talk about social justice and talk about entitlement. We're going to come back to that. And I have here a quote from C.S. Lewis. Ooh, this is too good. This is too good. The quote from C.S. Lewis says this: pride, on the other hand, is the mother of all sins and the original sin of Lucifer, which we're going to talk about that in a minute. An instrument strung by preferring to play itself because it thinks it knows the tune better than the musician. So God looks at us when we are being prideful, right? As though we are like an instrument that thinks that we can play ourselves, which is exactly the heart of a foolish person. I know what I'm doing. I know what's best for me. I want my free rides. I want to do this. And I'm sure this is going to... And that's why I say to you guys, when I say that we as humans walk ourselves into destruction, We as humans, God doesn't send anybody to hell. We choose to go to hell if we go to hell. God doesn't send anybody to hell. We go there. We choose to go there. Because we choose how we live our lives. We choose what we're doing. We, a lot of the time, this is why I really believe that pride is the worst sin. Like, one of the worst sins. So let's not say the worst sin, because that's not what the Bible says. But, well, anyway, I'm not, oh my gosh, now I'm just going off. Scratch everything that I just said about if pride versus what level of sin it is. Pride is one of the worst sins. Let's put it like that. And it is definitely the gateway to a lot of the other sins, because it leads to entitlement. It leads to all sorts of other things, which we're going to come to in a second. But before we do that, what was I going to talk about? I've completely forgotten. Oh yes, so why is God so concerned about pride? Why does he want to punish pride? Why does any of this matter? Right? And so I started to think of this analogy of credit, because realistically, when you're prideful about something, what we're really saying is, I want to be seen or given credit for, or acknowledgement or some type of thing for something that I've done or something that I'm a part of, right? I feel like I deserve to be seen for this thing or get something for this thing. So then I came up with an analogy for why God has an issue with pride and why pride is actually destructive in and of itself. Imagine you are the founder of McDonald's. I look at it as like God is like the founder of McDonald's, right? Let's say, and you're a McDonald's employee. That's us. Both of those people are needed. Both of those people worked. Both of those, but there has to be a hierarchy. Because the reality is, when we try to act as though we are our own gods or we can do everything without God, it's like a McDonald's employee saying that they can do everything. They could have their own restaurant without, all of this that they have is all because of themselves, without acknowledging that they had to be a founder and people who built this business. That's the same thing with God. So we can't take full credit for anything. And that's why I believe God has such an issue with pride, because it's like, it's not your place. And here's why it gets important. It's important because if me as a McDonald's employee, like, is trying to take pride and take the credit that I for all of this work of McDonald's, right? If somebody else wants to create a fast food chain, I do not have the information or the wisdom to give them to do that, because I am not the person who has can take the overall credit for the situation. And that's where pride becomes destructive. Because when and this is why, again, prideful people have to think they're better experts than the true experts, right? You think you're better than God, even though God, isn't it interesting? I've always found it interesting how I always find it interesting how in the world, people will always veer back to exactly how God said things should be done without God having to say anything. Because his way of doing things, it's not a bunch of rules and regulations of way he's judging us. He's like, this is how you will live a good life. A good life. And I'll give you guys an example. I know of a couple. I've spoken about this before, and I find this fascinating. I've been following Shan Boodram on YouTube for like probably a decade now, right? Maybe even more than. I've been following her for a very long time. She's a sex and relationship expert, right? Now, she for a while was in a relationship with a guy, and they were in an open relationship on both sides. They were both openly sleeping with other people. Cool. It was casual. Cool. It was a friends with benefits argument. Cool, right? As time went on, they decided that actually they wanted to be monogamous with not monogamous, sorry. They wanted to be in a relationship, but still an open relationship. So they're no longer friends with benefits. Now they're in a relationship, but it's not open. It's open, but they're now actually in a proper relationship together. But they've given themselves the permission. If you want to go and sleep with somebody else, go ahead. If you do, you do. But they weren't. Then she decides that she really actually wants to get married. So, and she actually said that, and this was interesting, her analogy that she used with him was, well, I feel like she used a car analogy, funnily enough, but she's like, why I feel like right now what I'm getting out of us is like the level of like having a Lamborghini, but my status is like the status of like a Ford Ka. Nothing wrong with these cars, by the way, but just saying, right? And she's like, so if I can have the Lamborghini, let's use the Prius, because I hate the Toyota Prius. It's my least. I hate the Toyota Prius, guys. I hate that car. Okay. Yeah, so he's like, so why would I? So she basically was saying that the value of this relationship is greater, right? Because now she's entered into that thing that the Lord created, which, if you ask me, I believe that they were intended by God to come together, and they were already husband and wife as far as God was concerned. But anyway, now they're married. with 2 children. And even when she was pregnant, she was like, babe, if you want to go and sleep with other women, like, go ahead. He's like, no, I don't want to do that to you. How can I do that to my wife while she's pregnant with my child? See what I'm saying? Like, they fought so hard in the beginning to like go outside, and they've spoken about against religion. And I'm not judging them, and I'm not trying to put religion onto them or anything, because you guys know I'm not a fan of religion. I've very much dismantled why I don't agree with religion in this video. But I just found it interesting how ultimately they went all the way back to exactly what God said in the first place. You know what I'm saying? And it's funny because even in the book of Proverbs, in wisdom, God says, enjoy the wife of your youth, blah, 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 blah. He's basically talking about like, enjoy having one woman who you can, and he's like basically saying, enjoy having one woman who you can be safely intimate with and build a life with and do all of this stuff with, as opposed to throwing yourself out here to these women who will destroy you. And that's actually the other funny thing that the Lord said. And how many men today are talking about the destruction that has come into their lives as a result of women, right? And I've even said to you guys that when the kingdom of darkness wants to destroy a man, they'll send a woman, right? Which I talked about this also in the Proverbs series. I think it was Proverbs 5, day 5, right? So again, us pridefully wanting to be able to do what we want to do, us thinking that we know better than God, leads to our own destruction. Then we're like, God, how did I end up here? It's like, because you wanted to do against what I said, and you thought I was just trying to tell you to do a bunch of rules because I hate you. But actually, I'm telling you what to do because I love you, and I'm a good father, and I know the boundaries, and I know the things you should and shouldn't do that's going to help you to live the best life. But you don't want to listen because you want to think you're above me, because you're like your father, Satan. Yeah, I went there. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about Satan. Now, and then we're going to finish off on this because we've really been here for a long time. So, pride. Lucifer was the most magnificent angel that God created. This is according to Eiselganger, by the way, which is truthful because, you know, it says in the Bible that he was like the most beautiful. Like, basically, he made him the most beautiful, talented of all the angels. Imagine this. Lucifer felt elevated above the angels. This is why humility is so important, guys, okay? And then he felt elevated above God. And this is, again, the same thing that we as humans do when we're prideful. We feel elevated above others. We feel superior to other human beings, right? Because as I said to you guys, I don't care if I have earned 10 billion. I'm the most beautiful woman on earth. I have every single career accolade you can think of, every single PhD you can think of. I am equivalent to a homeless person who has been homeless their whole life. I'm not better than them. No one is better than anybody on this planet Earth. At least that's how I look at life. A lot of people don't, because they obviously the pride thing, which we've spoken at length about. So first of all, Lucifer, you see, he created the framework for this pride thing. He elevated himself above the angels as far as his perspective, and then he elevated himself wanted to be above God. He said he created a throne for himself above the stars so he could be like God. It's like, if I'm like this, I may as well, like, forget you, which is, I feel like so sad for God that we as humans are just like always trying to cut him out of the deal. Like, that's just so sad. Like, I genuinely feel for God. Like, we're just always out here just like cutting God out of the deal. Like, I don't know how God must feel with us just always, like, him just giving us stuff, him just blessing us, and as soon as he blesses us with things, we don't want to have him anymore. Like, that's imagine the type of God that loves people like that. That's why I think God's love is so real, because the fact that he loves us, when as soon as he blesses us, the first thing we want to do is now take over his position and just cut him out of the deal, that would break my heart. So I love the Lord. This is why I'm very defensive of God, because when I think about how he must feel with the stuff that we do, like, I just really feel for him. So anyway, yeah, so he created a throne for himself above the stars so he could be like God. This is also what Satan is doing in the world today, by the way, and that's why the children of pride are the children of Satan. That's why even the Bible refers to them as the children of disobedience. Lucifer lost the war, of course, with 1/3 of the angels. God didn't even fight in the war, mind you. God just sent the other angels, which is funny because God's like, listen, it's funny. Somebody pointed this out in a message, how when Lucifer did what he did, God just sent other angels. God even shows up for humans more than he did Lucifer. Lucifer, he was like, you know what? All right. And this is, by the way, why Lucifer is so obsessed. We're going to come back to why Lucifer and why the enemy is so obsessed with destroying this world, right? We're going to come back to that, right? So God took away the beauty and made him ugly, right? So pride leads to entitlement and power, the need for power. Let's talk about it. So pride and inflated sense of self-importance. The key thing here with the enemy was that he forgot that he could not be like God because God created him. God created him. He was the product of God, and he had what he had as a result of God. God had the overall credit of the situation. So him even thinking he could operate at that level is just delusional. And this is where the Lord will let us run off into our own destruction. So here I have written, you know, that pride has been linked to be the mother of all sins. Pridefulness takes satisfaction in an elevated position over others. We feel better than others. What comes here? So now let's talk about a few things, right? So we have got Satan, who brought pride into Eve, telling her what? The same lie. To fall to pride because she knew, because she'll be what? You could be like God. God told you not to eat from this tree because you'd be like him, right? We think we are self-sufficient and we don't need God because we are like him. That's what we want to have, which I just don't understand. Because if you think about it logically, guys, if you really think, let's stop and have a logical thought track here for a second, right? If you as a person were to try and understand everything, in order for you to live the best life in this world, in order for you to make the best investments, in order for you to make the best decisions, in order for you to pick the best husband, the best wife, the best friends, the best place to live, the best place to work, you would actually have to know everything that exists in the world right now and that has ever happened, because that's the only way. I can say this as a scientist and a mathematician. That's the only way you could get the 100% perfect answer. You'd also have to know the future, because in order to be able to plan to make everything run perfectly, you would have to know that as well. Now, this is what what we do as humans is we run ourselves down these rabbit holes trying to understand everything. Why? Because we're trying to cut God out of the picture. Because God already knows everything. He knows everything that was before. He knows everything that's now. He knows everything that's going on in our minds, our hearts, our souls, our past, our future. He's the only one who knows the future, because the enemy doesn't know the future. That's the interesting thing about the kingdom of darkness that people don't realize, is the kingdom of darkness is a lot of the time experimenting. This is why the kingdom of darkness loves to use science, because the kingdom of darkness has to experiment to see how we'll react. That's why even in the Bible, it refers to things that happen as temptations, because the enemy doesn't actually know if you're going to fall to them temptation or not. God knows. The enemy is just trying it. Fascinating. So it's actually foolish for us as humans, based on the fact that we don't know everything. Like, if I was to say that I want to choose the best man for me and I didn't have God, I couldn't, guys. I'm such a mathematician and a scientist. There's so many things I wouldn't be able to live on this earth without God, because the fact that I can give things over to God is like what makes me able to live. Because otherwise, choosing a man, I'll be way overthinking it. This is why you always see with these men, especially the men in science, they can't get married. You know why they can't get married? They can't get in relationships. They're so overly analytical, and there's always more data to be had, and there's always more this and that, more things to be considered, that they can never settle down with one person because there's so much more to be understood. And that's why I just think it's total foolishness for us as humans to truly believe that in this short term that we're going to spend on this earth, we're somehow going to accumulate enough information, wisdom, and knowledge in order to make every single right decision. Because that would be being like God, if we want to talk about what it means to be like God. And that's why being prideful is just foolishness. Because you may as well hand over to the man to God, who does know what he's doing, who does know everything, who knows you better than you know your damn self, right? Because even us as people, we don't even know ourselves, right? So that was what the mistake of Adam and Eve. And look, Adam and Eve, Christians can be like, oh, when I get to heaven, I'm gonna talk to Eve. You are Eve. Every day you think you know better than God. You think that you want to do what you think is right, and what you've calculated, you're Eve. Because guess what? God is looking at you and he is laughing. He is laughing at you sometimes, because he's like, I told you, I tried to tell you. You know what I'm saying? Let's talk about Pharaoh in the Bible, right? He says, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go. This is in Exodus 5:2. Pharaoh, and again, this is why the higher, the more successful person you are. This is why it says that to get into heaven for a rich person would be like going through the eye of a needle, which is an actual cave, by the way, that's just really, really, really thin. But it's actually ironic because also the eye of a needle is really thin as well. So anyway, but the eye of a needle is an actual place. But anyway, why? Because the higher, the more success you have, the more you're going to feel like you are like God, the less humility that you're going to have. Because the more you go up in life, the more power you gain, right? The more you're going to feel like you are God, and the less you're going to see your need for God. But then that's also going to lead to your own destruction, because then God gave Pharaoh like 10 chances. He was like, listen. And it's interesting, if you read through the story, I talked about this in another video. If you read through that story of the 10 plagues, right, which is so funny how they teach this stuff and they don't talk about any of these wisdoms, and all the many times I've heard this story, right, they'll talk about how all these 10 plagues. Now, as the plagues progress, at first, the magicians that Pharaoh had could actually emulate what Moses did, which, here's an interesting fact you guys might not know. But even in actual historical texts, I think it's Greek and, oh, there's another one. I'm not sure if it's Greek and Roman, but there's one of them at least is Greek. I think, is it Greek? There's two specific countries. I think it's Greece and one other place. In like the 1st and 3rd century, they actually have Moses listed in their list of magicians, along Janus and Jambres, who are the other magicians mentioned in the Bible. So even the people who didn't believe that Moses was the son of God or whatever, they saw what he did and they believed the historical texts. Actually, the historical, not biblical, historical texts accounted Moses as a magician. Isn't that interesting? But anyway, so when Moses was doing his he was doing his magic, I was going to say, God forbid, when Moses was doing the miracles of the Lord, right, at first Pharaoh's magicians could match up, right? So then Pharaoh's thinking like, yeah, you see what I mean? Like, who is this God? Like, I am God. Isn't it funny how when people get to a certain level of power, they think they're like God? Isn't it funny how, as I'm making this video, we're looking at people who just died trying to go and see the Titanic. The Titanic, by the way, here's the irony of the Lord. The Titanic that sunk, that they said even God couldn't sink. And we've just seen 5 people pay $250,000 to go and visit the wreckage of a boat, of a ship that apparently God even couldn't sink. It's giving Pharaoh and Moses. You feel me? You know what I'm saying? Not the submarine, but I'm just saying, you know. Listen, anyway. So then, as the miracles progressed, they started to get more and more difficult for the magicians, to the point where the magicians couldn't do it, but Pharaoh's heart kept hardening. That's what happens when you're prideful and you were so desperate to stay. Because the thing is, think about it being Pharaoh. Pharaoh is used to doing whatever he wants, king of everything, doing all of this, right? So do you think he wants to be threatened that there is something or somebody above him? That's pride, ladies and gentlemen. That he needs to be criticized. That's pride, ladies and gentlemen, right? And so eventually, God says, you know what? I gave you 9 chances, and he kills all the firstborn sons. Imagine what Pharaoh's thinking, what kind of power is this that you killed all the first? How do you even just only target all? I'm sure the magicians were even stunned. The magicians had been stunned. Why did God do this? God did this just to prove he was more powerful. And he did this all the time in the Bible, where he would prove. I remember there was one time where one of the prophets was proving, they were like, whoever's God is real will set something to fire. And the other people, they kept praying to their God and nothing was set fire. And then this other prophet like literally made the whole altar like wet with water. As in, like, this thing shouldn't catch on fire, and then fire flew from heaven and lit this thing up. Like, why is God always doing this? Why did God give these miracles? Why does God do miracles? He does it to remind people that he really truly is who he says he is, and he really is more powerful above anybody and anything else, right? And that's why when we try to think we're better or we know better, that we're walking into pride. And I believe that's why the world is in destruction. Because I'll ask you guys a simple question in the month of Pride, and we'll finish with this video here because it's a long one, but I knew it'd be a long one and I believe it was worth it, right? I'll ask you guys this very, very simple question. We're all very prideful about a lot of things, how we want to live our life, whatever movement that we're a part of, social action, whatever, right? Where has that got us in the world today? Genuine question. Because the way the world looks to me right now, us as men and women are divided more than ever right now. Nobody wants to people don't want to get married. People don't want to have families. We're all career focused. We're all trying to find ways to live on our own or find the cheap, shortcutted versions of the clearly better versions that we all know exist in, right? We have all these different communities. We're all arguing with each other. There's rioting, there's striking, there's what's that thing? Yeah, striking is what it is. There's all this different stuff. We're arguing online constantly. People are getting cancelled. Everybody thinks that they've got the right idea. I'm better than you, you're better than me. The world is going downhill, as we know, guys, right? And the world is going down here. We're sicker than we ever are. We have more medication. Everything is medication. This, medicating that, medicating that. Like, I often think about things like allergies. I think about things like all these supplements that we take. I think about all these skincare routines and all of these things that we do now that never existed in the days of Abraham. Therapy. But these people were living for hundreds of years, and we're supposed to be the apex of humanity. Maybe the issue that is destroying this world is that we truly believe that we don't need God. And we are lying to ourselves, and we are deluded. And I get it, because it goes back to the inferiority thing. Because when we acknowledge that we need God in all the areas in which we need him, it is going to make us feel inferior in some sense, right? But it's not supposed to be a negative thing. It's supposed to be a positive thing, because God's supposed to basically, like, the way I look at it is like, God looks at us and it's like, when you give your life to Christ, you're acknowledging that you're imperfect, and then you'll never get everything perfect, and you'll never be able to earn your place in heaven. You'd never be able to earn your relationship with the Lord on your own. That's why the Bible says Jesus is the only way to the Father. The only way to the Father is through him. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. The only way to the Father is through him. Why? Because he actually did fulfill the law, which is what makes me believe that Jesus is God, right? He did fulfill all the law. He did do everything perfectly, right? But that's because also he was conceived with the Spirit of God, right? And the Spirit of God conceived him, was essentially his father. Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense now that I think about it. Because the Spirit of God is his father. So that's why he's always like, my father this. Oh my gosh, it makes so much freaking sense. Anyway, so, yeah, oh my gosh, that makes so much freaking sense. Anyway, and so he did all of that, which God basically put himself into humanity so that he could do what we could never do. And thus, that is the name of Jesus. We receive Jesus, and we say to Jesus, you know what, Jesus, I could never do it on my own. And I'm not smart enough or intelligent on my own, which is the thing that none of us want to say, because that takes humility. But then here's the funny thing. As soon as you make that declaration, as soon as you receive Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, like, literally God is like, okay, I got you now. And then you just get to be a part, like, now it's like, I feel like I'm employed by the Lord, which I am employed by the Lord. And it's amazing, because people will look at me and I'll still get the things I could have got from a shortcutted route of, like, being so dedicated to career, like people acknowledging me or getting cool opportunities. Like I just said, I just spent 3 weeks in Italy as a professional singer, all expenses paid, like insane. I was staying in like 4-star hotels, hello, for the last 3 weeks, living my best life, drinking wine in the mountains, drinking the best wine. My friend happens to know, happens to be friends with the family that makes one of the best wines in all of Italy. So I was drinking the best wine in Italy, guys. Can you understand this? And how did I get there? Not because I was chasing the career, not because I was doing whatever, because I was submitted to the Lord from the place of, Lord, I need you. I need you, because on my own, when I do things on my own, I get it wrong. You know what you're doing, and your way is always better. And listen, I had plans of what I was going to be doing, and I was not going to be doing that. What I was going to be doing was nowhere near in comparison to as good as what the Lord had intended, and even what the Lord is doing now. Because when I came back, I had no plans, and the Lord is like, this is what we're doing. I'm like, are you crazy? Is this what we're really doing right now? I can't even tell you guys what we're doing, because it's not even stuff I can talk about right now. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's the difference between, and I say this, guys, I don't say this to show off about my life, right? And this is where we circle back to my initial question to the Lord is, what's the difference between pride and confidence? The difference is, quite simply, is my confidence is not in myself. My confidence is in God. And because of my confidence is God, I know that his goal for me is to live my best life. So I can move confidently and boldly, and I can boldly call my channel the winning team, not because it's accredited to me, but it's accredited to the co-founders of this channel, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. I'm just the CEO. Does that make sense? They are the co-founders. I'm like the chief executive officer. I'm like the chief innovative officer. And actually they inquire on me all the time about how to do all that stuff, right? That's how this thing works. But they are the founders. They are the people who brought this concept together. And I participate, and that's why I call my channel the winning team, because it's like, if I'm with God, there is no way I don't win, because God does know everything, and God does know all the past and the future and everything about me. He knows how he created me and how he created for me to win in life. So there is no loss on this side, right? And the things that people are scared to accept about themselves, I have a sense of identity that's not about my gender, that's not about my sexuality, not about my race, that's not about whatever, right? Even my age, right? My identity is something. My identity is that I'm a daughter of the Lord. I'm God's precious child. I'm his precious daughter. You know what I'm saying? That's where my self-worth comes from. That's why I don't care about people seeing me online and doing all this online. And I don't care about being acknowledged and fighting for this, whatever. Because guess what? I'm God's favorite child, okay? Right now, I'm God's favorite child. You know why I'm God's favorite child? Because so many people are not even bothering to give God the opportunity. So I'm just here benefiting off of things that we could all be benefiting off of. But y'all too busy acting in your pride. And that's why I have an issue with this month of pride, right? Because it's a very empty. Pride is a very empty thing because it just hides that deep down we all know we're inferior. Deep down we all know we could never be perfect. From before we could even think properly, guys, we were already making mistakes as babies. So the fact that we try to think that somehow we can really take credit for everything in our lives is pure foolishness. And if we continue to go about like that, somehow life is going to show us, because even like somebody was saying, like even successful people, you have to think about this. It's this whole luck versus fate. Even if you think about it from a purely logical perspective, if you're successful, somebody even say like Elon Musk, somebody say even like whoever else, right? Even Kanye West, right? There are things about their lives that, as hardworking as these men are, because I truly believe these two men are extremely hardworking men and intelligent men, right? Who have worked really hard to have the stuff they have, right? But there are still certain things about their lives and our lives that give us benefits that we cannot take credit for. This is something that's a purely logical argument, i.e. for me, right? There's things like the fact that I was born in the United States, I cannot take credit for that. The fact that I grew up in the UK, I cannot take credit for that. The fact that I happen to, a lot of things, the fact that I happen to know how to write a CV or resume, I cannot take credit for that, right? That I had the opportunity to learn that. The fact that I had the opportunity to understand, that I had a teacher actually tell me. So here's a funny story, by the way, guys, about when I was going to university. So at first I wasn't even going to study chemistry. I wanted to study, before that, I wanted to study maths actually. But then before that, I was even going to study child nursing, if you can imagine. That's what I was actually going to study. And you know what's funny? This is what I mean about things that you can't help, right? What's funny is the lady where I was studying at the time when I was doing my application for university said to me, "You just don't seem passionate about this." That's what she said. She's like, "You just don't seem very passionate about this." I was like, "Really?" And it was because of her that I changed what I was going to study. And guys, how much has chemistry become the fundamentals of my life? Fundamentals of the fact that I'm able to just easily teach practically whenever, because why? Everybody needs maths and chemistry. Everybody struggles with maths and chemistry. So I virtually always have a job in like majority of the world. Like that's freaking insane. So again, I can't take credit for that because again, those ladies just happened to be those ladies where I was. Is it fate or is it luck? Or is it God's divine plan? And should we be giving the glory and the acknowledgement and the credit to God? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I believe that pride is what is destroying this world. Because when we act in pride, we walk ourselves into our own destruction. Because with pride, pride removes God from the equation. And God is an essential part of the equation. God is almost like gravity. In a sense, so many different processes in the world right now are dependent upon us understanding gravity, because gravity is affecting everything on earth. Gravity has to be taken into account for us to fly a plane into the sky, for us to, you know, move a car or a train, be in the sea, for us to walk. It has an effect on how our body structures. If gravity changes, everything in the world would change as well, right? I was having a very interesting conversation with my brother about string theory and gravity the other day. So really interesting. Love me some science. My point being is it's just pure foolishness to walk in pride, because pride comes, why does the Bible say pride comes before destruction? What does it actually say specifically? Because I don't know if it comes before or if it's, I've been talking for a long time. I did well. Pride goes before destruction. So pride goes before destruction. I think I know what I'm doing. I think I know this. And then there's destruction. And then we want to look at the Lord, and the Lord's like, but you cut me out. And you chose your father Satan, who did the very same thing, which is see himself above everybody else and then see himself above me. And look where that got him. And that's where he's trying to get you. And that's why you're in pride. And that's why, guys, this month, I'm sorry to say it, LGBTQ plus people, I love you dearly. I worry for you, because I only want to see everybody happy, thriving. if the decisions you've made, if the things you fought so hard for, if the pride that you have is still leading to you being in bondage to disorders, in bondage to mental health issues, in bondage to poverty, in bondage to pain, in bondage to all these different things, right? If you still are feeling like you want to take your own life and dealing with depression and anxiety, if you're still struggling to have relationships and have people around you and all of this type of stuff, then clearly you haven't found the solution, baby. I hate to say it to you. I hate to say it to you. And that's the truth. And that's why I had to make this video. And I was so excited because as I was unpacking this, it made me understand that the pride, people who are prideful truly, and pride isn't of itself. First of all, it's a gateway to entitlement. You will start to entitle yourself to things that are not better for you, like greed, right? Let's talk about the people. I was watching a video of a woman walking through it was a funny video, right? A woman was walking through an airplane and she was like huge, like way hugely obese, right? And in the video she was like, how rude is it that aircrafts don't make space for like people like me? And I mean, she was huge. I was actually surprised she could even walk, how big she was, right? And anyways, as somebody who's very much an airplane enthusiast, I was just looking at her and I was thinking, this just isn't even logistical to make the plane bigger for what she was trying to say. But anyways, not important. And the guy who was commenting on it actually says, yeah, how horrible for us to want you to lose weight and look healthy. Like, how horrible for us to want that. And that's what happens, guys. We start to get this entitlement. Pride brings us into delusion. And then we start to want entitlement for things that are not for the best for us. They're really not. They're not for the best for us. What we need to do, guys, is we need to learn to address the things that make us feel inferior, to accept that we are all equal as humans. We have flaws, right? We may have issues that need to be dealt with. We might have a lack of identity. I remember I went through a stage in my life as well where I was like, you know what? I don't have a personality. Like I said to God, I was like, God, I have no idea who I am. I literally said that to him. I have no idea who I am. Because I realized that I don't know who I am. Like, who is she? Who is she? You know what I'm saying? And so that's why I do believe pride is destroying this world, guys. Even these top level scientists and the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Bill Gates, they're all with pride as well. They are so desperate to prove that God, scientists, I've realized the scientists, a lot of them are just so desperate to prove that God doesn't exist, are so desperate to find another way. And then God just is constantly laughing and disproving and dispelling everything because he's like, you thought you were going to get away with that? That's so sweet. Not going to happen, my friend. Not going to happen. And that's how it is, guys. We keep thinking that we're somehow going to be ahead of God. We're somehow going to outthink him. And that's why he punishes people like that, because it's not helpful. He doesn't want people to continue going down these destructive paths. He punishes the proud to give lessons to those others in pride, to humble yourselves and wake the freak up. Like Pharaoh, he's like, humble yourself and wake the freak up. Right? You know, one person in the Bible, actually, is that a person I want to mention? Even the Pharisees, wake the freak up. Because it's not about me trying to feel better than you as God. It's not about me trying to rule your life. It's about the fact that on your own, your pridefulness will lead to destruction. And that's why I believe that people walk themselves to hell, because I believe hell is a place of total disorder and heaven is a place of total order. And it's interesting that the laws of entropy state that the world is moving, the universe is moving constantly from a state of order to disorder. Right, which is why I believe the world is going the way that it does. And the only way that doesn't happen if there is an opposing force, which I believe is the Lord, that helps you to go against it. And I believe that the starting point of entropy, which is what we're talking about, the law of entropy, was in the garden with Adam and Eve. When they decided to say, I know better than God. And disorder was introduced into the world and distraction. And that is why I do believe, ladies and gentlemen, that pride is what is destroying this world right now. And why we all need to humble ourselves before the Lord, accept the fact that we need him, accept the fact that we need the Lord Jesus, because he's the only person who did what none of us could have ever done, which is what the whole point of the Bible was. That's why the Old Testament shows us, oh my gosh, you guys could never do it on your own. And then the New Testament is like, but don't worry, the good news, the gospel is that God already, in his infinite knowledge and wisdom of past, present, and future, 5D, 8D, 9D, 10D, right, knew this was going to happen and already accounted for it. And that is through the name of Jesus. So guys, I didn't expect this to be a message about Jesus, but here we are. thank you so much for watching this. If you made it to the end of this video, please tell me that you did, because I was so excited to make this. I knew it would be long, but I can't take my foot off the gas with this one, guys. We had to say everything that needed to be said. Don't forget to let me know your thoughts in the comments and subscribe, because if life's a game, let's play to win. I always say that, guys. If life's a game, let's play to win. My winning strategy is that true wisdom is to follow every single thing that God tells me to do as best as I can. I still don't all the time, and the Lord is still looking at me like all the time, but I try my best. And listen, I'm living in the testimony and in the fruits of that experience, and that's why this channel is called The Winning Team, and that's why I can boldly say that if life's a game, let's play to win. God bless every single one of you guys, and I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye.